Great to be back. I really, I miss teaching a lot, even though the practices have been very fun and successful in many ways. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about our studio. It's called wHY Architecture, and I think John asked me, well, what does the name mean, wHY? 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 And, you know, I think my partner and I, when we were first starting, Kulapat Yantrasast, whom, as John mentioned, I met at the University of Tokyo, we were kind of contemplating what kind of names we could use. And, you know, one of them was Hakomori Yantrasast Partners. Well, we don't want to just be hyped, so we decided against that one. We had other ones like wHY, yeah. That doesn't work either. So we came up with a name, wHY, W standing for workshop. And so, you know, at the time, it was just a name, workshop. A lot of other firms use that term workshop. But as it's turned out, it really has become a workshop in the sense that neither myself or my partner Kulapat are really doing the designing and sketching and handing it off to the people in our office to execute. That it really is a collaborative office, a workshop, if you will. And the big table in the middle of the space is used for a lot of design sessions. We have teams of people meeting, and oftentimes we meet with everybody from the project architects down to the interns, and we all sit around the table and we think about the design, we collaborate in that way. So in the truest sense of the word, wHY has become a workshop, and we're very proud of that. The other thing that we've started about a year ago is how, so it's why and how. And I think in some ways how had started off as an adjunct to wHY to build furniture and things related to the client's wishes. I'm going to show you some pieces that how built, but more and more we're trying to think about how and how works with why. And one of the concepts that we have is that why, if you imagine all the projects being vertical in this sort of striation, each project, and you have different phases of work for a particular project, how really interjects its ideas and its research in the horizontal way. So it's almost like a weaving of how and why. And we're just starting that concept. How has begun to, we've staffed how with some more architects and research types. And so we're starting to interject some planning and also some master planning and upfront research. Too loud? Oh. Oh yeah, I forgot the lights. Interjecting that sort of research into the relationship of wHY. And also, they continue to look into materials. We've had how construct and research into how materials can be utilized on the art bridge that you mentioned. One of the projects that I will show you is the art bridge, which really is the interjection of found materials into the project, and how has been researching and doing tests on how we can incorporate those found materials in the landscape. So that's the relationship of why and how, and I think it's becoming very interesting, the two entities. I mean, we're all in the same space. We have an area dedicated for how, which is primarily the wood shop and things in our office. But and recently we started an office in New York. It's only 3 people right now, or actually more. It's 5 now. We have a couple interns there. But I think the bi-coastal relationship of our LA office, our Culver City office in New York, has been a very fruitful, productive relationship. And as you can see, we have a big old TV sitting there right in the space. And every Monday, with all the technology you have of uploading, and they have full access to our servers from New York, and we have our meetings via Skype there as well as through the course of the week. So it's a very interesting relationship, a new relationship with people, with clients, and with our firm in New York, and how we can really seamlessly work together. For instance, one of our projects is being designed in New York because the staffing is better there for that, but it's actually a project in LA. And that sort of interweaving of people and expertise into the makeup of the office has been very, very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about my history, because I didn't study architecture as an undergraduate student, I studied biochemistry. So why am I showing this piece of art here? This is a work by Caravaggio, who's a very famous Italian painter. At the same time, I was at a liberal arts school, so they encouraged us to take classes in many different fields. And of course, I took art history, not knowing that eventually I would go into architecture. But art history and drawing I took at the same time. And interestingly enough, I was fascinated by Caravaggio and other Renaissance painters that used light in a very succinct and interesting way. And Caravaggio was one of the first painters that had a clear source of light. And so you have this chiaroscuro effect of light and dark in a lot of his paintings. And it creates a depth to the painting. Also, the way that the materials and the textures are brought out in the light of day. And I think that is really something that I was quite impressed by looking at Caravaggio's paintings. And of course, Jean Vermeer, a Dutch painter, a little later, but the paintings by Jean Vermeer were always set, or not always, but a lot of them were set within architecture. And from that, you really understood, and almost my point of view about this is that almost the architecture is a backdrop for the figures in the painting, but the way that the light reflects off the walls, and the way that it's just quite amazing if you look at this, how they're able to paint the different textures, that being a translucent piece of cloth, and that being an opaque one, and the skill and that it takes to do that. And at the same time, I was taking a drawing class, and we were learning how to draw with no lines, just with shadow and shade. And if you just look around this room, you can see the kind of quality of light here and up in the air and over there, and the subtleties of light and how you draw that really makes you understand how light works in a space and how it interjects its presence into a room or into an outdoors. And that kind of conjunction between looking at paintings and studying how to draw really opened my eyes to the kind of reading of space in light. After graduating, I traveled, this is before I studied architecture, so I traveled through Europe with a couple of friends. We rode our bikes around, and I encountered this. Now, you've got to understand that I grew up in Seattle, Washington, in the suburbs. And you can imagine that the kind of urban environment that you find in Seattle, in the suburbs, doesn't have buildings like this. As a matter of fact, I was blown away by this building the first time I walked in. I'm sure you guys all know it's the Pantheon in Rome. But at the same time, I think it made my interest in painting and drawing on a very superficial way. It wasn't something I pursued as a profession. But it kind of brought to light that, no pun intended, but it kind of brought to reality the way that light concretizes space, and the way that light creates the textures and the qualities of materiality that architecture has. And you don't see that in Seattle, Washington, in the suburbs, because everything is, not like this. So also the experience of the urban environment. I mean, some of you, I'm sure, have gone to Europe and have seen the kind of urban spaces, and the spaces related to the buildings and the architecture and the interiors and the materiality. There's a presence to them that is quite different from what we see in the United States, or at least in the part that I grew up and I was familiar with. So this had a very strong impact, not just this building, but other cathedrals, Amiens, and first cathedral I walked in, the way the light came in through the clerestory was just amazing. Having gone to school at UCLA and then working for a bit, Frank Israel, Koning Eizenberg, and a few people, I then went back to school to the University of Tokyo, not intending at all to get a doctorate, but I ended up getting a doctorate. But in the research that I did there, first of all, not knowing too much about Japanese architecture, even though I was born there, has anyone read this book by Tanizaki? It's really a small treatise on the importance of shadow in Japanese aesthetics and Japanese art and Japanese architecture. So Tanizaki says that it's not just about the light, that there is a dichotomy between light and dark, and that much of traditional Japanese architecture and traditional Japanese craft is about the darkness. And here you see an example of Shisendo in Kyoto, where the relationship of the garden and the interior is well spoken about and well shown. But what you don't always realize is that the interior of these houses is quite dark. And the way that the light can only penetrate to the back is through a reflection off of the tatami mats bouncing back. And oftentimes in the imperial homes, they will use gold leaf in the back in order for the light to catch and hit the gold leaf screens in the back. And that kind of relationship of light and dark is very important in Japanese architecture, as Tanizaki has written so eloquently about in his book, or his treatise. Here we have another house, a Japanese house, and the kind of light that enters through the clerestory, again, you see it's quite dark. But it's the darkness and the light and the contrast that reveal kind of the detailing and the materiality of the architecture that gives it a strong sense of presence that I kind of felt similar in looking at this at a much different scale as I did when I walked into the Pantheon. And of course, Tadao Ando has built a career out of working with light, and this being the Church of Light. Again, the Church of Light is a lot more dark than it is light. The cross is highlighted in light, and the way that the light enters is beautiful, masterful, but he understands the way light and dark work together to create these effects and create a presence. I mean, we all know Kahn's statement, you know, what did he say? What slice of sun does your building receive, or something like that. And he really understood that through his travels, and I think that both in Europe and in Asia, you find this kind of interesting dichotomy between light and dark and the way it reveals materials. So I'm going to go into the why in our work very quickly. We usually have an hour, right? Okay, so architecture. What is architecture? I'm going to skip a little bit. What I talked about in the beginning was kind of my own background and my own sense of interest in things and how it's begun to evolve over the course of years. And the architecture that wHY architecture does. And what is architecture for us? Now, this isn't meant to be a philosophy about architecture, what is good and what is bad architecture. It's not a philosophy. I have no philosophy. I have a point of view and a series of things that we're interested in. I shouldn't say I, we as a firm, wHY Architecture, is interested in. First of all, architecture is about people. And I think that people, meaning, if you take the word people, all-encompassing, it's about how people use space. It's about how the client will use the space. It's about programming. It's about understanding how the building fits into the context of a city. It's about how circulation occurs. It's about connections. Those are the things that I think are very important when you think about architecture. And I think people is one of the most important aspects to consider when you're thinking about making architecture. And nature. Nature in many different ways. Nature in terms of the natural forces, as Pierre Koning used to say. Natural forces is important to understand light, wind, and air, and how that works with your building, how you site the building based on nature, the way the sunlight enters. Light, as I mentioned before, is beautiful, and it gives architecture its presence, but it also heats up a building, so you have to control that, and all that is related to nature. But nature is also related to other things. What is nature in terms of the landscape? The relationship of us as a society to the landscape and to the earth. And that's an important aspect that our office is very much concerned about. Earth. So when I say earth, I'm talking about how to preserve the resources that the earth has. But it's also how does the society relate to the landscape, and how do we interject our ideas and our architecture relative to landscape. And finally, art. I think that over the course of the years, through my experience working with Kulapat at wHY Architecture, that art is very important as a generator of ideas and a sense of inspiration. And it's not necessarily about form. It's really about content and about ideas about what an artist has and what they do in order to be inspired. I just want to show you this sculpture, which to me is fascinating. Not just this, but this is a work by Michael Heiser. And he has, I'm sure you guys know his work on double negative, and a lot of these things are about carving into the earth, scratching the earth's surfaces, and sometimes placing things in them like this, and sometimes not. But there's a blurring between what is man-made and what is natural, and there's a kind of dichotomy between the kind of excavation that he does to the earth and the placement of the stone. For me, it's very poetic in the sense that it's about, for me, it's about permanence and ephemerality. That you look at this and you say, well, what is this about? Why do we have a stone sitting in it? Well, I don't really know, except that when I look at it, I say, well, let's look at this 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, and what will you find? I think that the impermanence of the man-made whole will begin to degrade, and the permanence of the rock will remain. And I think that, I don't know how this relates to the architecture, actually, but I'm inspired by the kind of thought that this generates and the kind of thinking that the artist has to produce this. I think I reflect back on a walk on the beach when you trace your footsteps and you look at your footstep and then 10 seconds later it disappears. And I think that is really what this is about, that 100 years from now this will disappear. It's also about time and the relationship of time relative to the earth. I mean, I don't think it's about time like 25 years, 50 years. It's really about a continuation of time and the relationship of time to we as people here, as well as the architecture we make. Carl Andre also is poetic in my mind because he's a minimalist artist, but he works with materials that are simple materials that you find on a construction site, and he cuts them very precisely to these shapes and forms. But we know that this is wood, and wood does not last, and it will degrade over time, it will decay. And that kind of relationship between the artwork and thinking about the passage of time relative to the material is very thought-provoking and interesting. So I'm going to jump to the first project, the Great Wall of LA, Interpretive Green Bridge. We call it the Art Bridge for short. And it's on the Tujunga Wash, which is here. And the Great Wall of Los Angeles is actually a mural that is painted in the 20s when they concreted all of the rivers and tributaries to control flooding, that artist Judith Baca, oh, I didn't know this was going to be so fancy. Artist Judith Baca, where is she? Oh, she got a grant to paint a mural that is a half mile long along the edge of the river. And she painted the history of Los Angeles. She took 400 at-risk youths, that's hard to say, and painted this beautiful mural about the history of Los Angeles and the history of the LA basin. So here they are setting up the painting, and this was in 1976, something like that. And this is what it looked like then. So this is the Great Wall of Los Angeles. It's the tattoo on the scar of the landscape, as she calls it. And it's really quite a wonderful piece. They just received a California Cultural Endowment grant to renovate the whole thing, and they finished renovating it. And a part of that funding was to create a new bridge that acts as a way to cross from one side of the community to the other, because these rivers really divided the community, but also as a way to observe and find information about the Great Wall of Los Angeles. And we designed it in a way that is cyclical, that you have a form that cycles across and you have a slit in the middle of the bridge, which is not really a slit. There's grading or something so you won't fall through. And then we put these time markers that as you're crossing, you're reading about the history of the Great Wall, and you're also reading about the river and the concreting of the river and the kind of things that happened, to that, because part of it is being funded by the Santa Monica Conservancy. So that's what these are. These are time markers or interpretive stations that you can read as you're crossing the bridge. Just some drawings. I just wanted to show that this is a real project. But we did this in 2008 or 9, and the funding, oh my God, it's really tough to get it all going, and we're still trying to raise a little bit more money, but hopefully we'll start construction soon. So we have on the slit is right here, and the bridge you cross across like that. These are kind of, and there's a model of it, so you can kind of see the loop form, and the loop form creates the void. The void is kind of a metaphor for the bridge, for the river itself, because the river divides the community, like the void divides the bridge. But out of that void comes the information, and out of the void in the community is the information. So it's a kind of parallel reading of the river and the bridge together. And we find garbage. There's garbage everywhere in the river. So we look at the garbage and we say, what can we do with the garbage that would make this a more appropriate site-sensitive project? And so we're experimenting about using the garbage and grinding it all up and putting it into the concrete mix, which I mentioned to you that's something that the how component of our office has been doing. And so these are initial mock-ups that we presented to the group, Cultural Affairs Committee, that, you know, this is what we're going to do. I don't know about this bag, though. That might not work. But we're using, hopefully using shopping carts cut up to form the guardrails, and we're using the garbage that we find and inserting it into the end walls that are concrete. So there's a kind of connection to the site specificity that is incorporated into the bridge, which we think is kind of cool and interesting. And so it has many different layers of how we're thinking about this. The next project I want to show is the Tyler Museum of Art in Tyler, Texas. And Tyler, Texas is far east of Dallas, and it's almost to the border of Louisiana. And you got to say Tyler, right? Otherwise they get mad at you. Tyler, that's how you say it. Okay. And so this is, there's an opening, there's a clearing, and we thought of the clearing as the meadow, the opening, and the woodland. It's 14 acres of woodland with a creek running down the middle of it, and there's all kinds of animals living in there. There's some beavers in there too. So the idea was to build a building and site the buildings at the edge of the meadow so that we don't have to cut down too many trees. And of course, with a forest or canopy, you have the upper part of the canopy, and you have the middle part, and you have the lower part. So how best to take advantage of this beautiful landscape that we find in this part of Tyler, Texas? So we worked with Reed Hildebrand, landscape architects, and they developed a concept for the landscape, which was really quite nice. And let's not use grass, and let's not use pesticides to water the lawn, you know, that you find in a lot of places. But they wanted to create a natural meadow, which was maybe not a novel idea, but a beautiful one at the same time. And we would create a meadow in the front where the parking would insert itself in the meadow, and you wouldn't see the parking. And we came up with this idea of this alley that collected the people from the parking and approached the building. And the building is kind of sitting at the edge of the existing meadow. So you see it, but you don't see it in entirety when you approach the building. And here's a model. It's really kind of confused. So here's the parking, and here's the alley. You enter onto the roof deck of the lower volume, and you go into the building. So this is a section that shows the parking out here, and you enter on the second floor. The galleries are up here. There's a galleries here too. And there's a service and education wing down here, and the administration is on the upper level. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. Again, you enter off the alley onto a deck. This is a green roof, and you enter this way into this volume. And now this thing is rotating 60 degrees every time it goes up a floor. So the structure was quite interesting. These are some views of the cafe looking out into the woods. And again, all of the boxes are, as much as conceptually we wanted to keep the end of the boxes open so that you have a lecture hall and it's completely open on the end. And second level being the galleries and so on. So I just want to show you a quick video that we produced for this. This is the Wizard of Oz video. This is the part I was referring to. To the left is the auditorium, and this space was really conceived of as a multi-purpose room that could hold lectures and open up to the auditorium as well as a cafe. So even though they're three distinct spaces, the owner, the client was hoping to be able to use them as one single space for events. going to stop this because I'm not going to have enough time otherwise. So we'll just end that there. And how do I do this? Share? No, view. Oh well, just do this. Okay. Oops. Sorry, it's always a little awkward when I do that. Okay, so we'll just go here, and so the exterior is, we envisioned it to be clad in metal, serrated metal, at different degrees, so that you'll get a kind of a kinetic effect on the facade because it's metal and it's got facets on it, so you'll see it reflecting light differently as you move around the building, which thought was interesting. This is the back side. Okay. The next project I'd like to talk about is a recent completed project called the Perry Rubenstein Gallery in Hollywood. And our office was fortunate enough to get this project. Kulapat is the primary designer and running this project. But it's a gallery owner that just moved from New York to LA. I mean, it was rather quick that he had a very successful gallery in New York, and he decided LA is a better spot for it. So anyway, Hollywood was an important kind of image for him, and because of that, it generated a lot of talk about what that meant to move from New York to Hollywood, and the kind of clientele and the differences in the business structure here was something that was very important to him. And so this is kind of the conceptual view. It's an existing building. The exterior is just what it was, painted black. And in terms of the gallery space, this is Highland, and there's a parking lot. And this is an existing building. But what the office did, what wHY Architecture did, was carved a space right out of the middle, right out of the side of this building. And the reason why is that it brings in light, it brings in planting, it brings in nature, and it provides respite from looking at the art, and you go through a transition space into the other galleries. And I think it turned out quite effective rather than just having gallery after gallery with no visual connection to the outdoors. So the second floor has a mezzanine, which is will be a stair going up to the rooftop, which will have a rooftop in phase 2. So these are the renderings. And this is the kind of outdoor space that you connect through to the back galleries. And this is a rooftop deck with bar and all those wonderful things, and the Hollywood sign in the background. So this connection to Hollywood and the Hollywood Hills was an important aspect to the client and to the project. And so this was recently photographed, the main gallery. And if you notice, there's a big O in the middle here of the skylight, and that is O for Hollywood. And so these are the connections into the various galleries. But if you go to this side, to the right or left, you have this open space that was carved out of the existing warehouse. And then from there, you go this way to the other galleries, or you go this way to the back gallery. It's a very simple project. There's nothing fancy about it, except that I think that with all of our projects, we very much care about the detailing. And something like this or something like that makes a big difference in how the walls read and how the floor reads, and the materiality of this and how the light reflects on that. This is all concrete, smooth trial concrete, and it really turned out better than we had expected. And so here's a reveal at the top, and all those little things really add up to make the project better. Some other galleries. The next project I want to show is the Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. And this is an old building, 1929, the original museum. And the original museum had a lot of additions over the course of the last 90 years. And there was additions of an auditorium here and an entrance over here. And what happened was that it really made the museum inaccessible. You're faced with walls. You don't know where the entrance is. It's not inviting. And it becomes very difficult for people to want to go in because there's no connection to people, there's no connection to nature, and those are the things that we try to bring back. It sits on the edge of the campus of Louisville, University of Louisville, and students walk by it, 1,000 students walk by it, and they don't even go in because they don't even know it's there. So that was a major issue about the design, not our design. And you have these kind of awkward spaces. This is a garage. This is that walkway I was telling you about. It's called Ship's Walk. And 1,000 students walk from their dormitories to the main part of the campus every day. And here's the museum, and none of them knew what it was. They just thought it was a empty building. So how to deal with that? Actually, my partner came up with the idea of describing this way of renovating buildings as acupuncture architecture. And what that means is, rather than doing a big gesture, let's do strategically focused interventions so that it opens up the circulation, so it opens up connections to the landscape, and it really rejuvenates the entire museum in a way that acupuncture rejuvenates the body. And so we found that these are the main acupuncture points. Cooper Robertson did a scheme where they cut a big swath of stuff right through the middle of this building, and it cost $1 million, way too much money, and it was a mall scheme. But rather than do that, why not? Well, one thing I have to explain is that this addition by Thomas Beebe and this original building by Loomis was disconnected except by a very dark stairway. So you had to go in here on the second floor, and you had to go back down and out in the lower level, and then you had to always walk back and forth. There was no kind of natural way of circulating. So part of the issue was the Cooper Robertson scheme was good in the sense that it created a spine, but how do you do that without spending that kind of money? And what we did was we decided that instead of going into these rooms here and then having to double back, we would cut an opening here and make this the spine, the Loomis building the spine, and that your entry would be here, and we would add a small addition back here that will allow circulation through and up and down and out again. So it was these acupuncture points that we focused on, creating small additions and small renovations. And then, of course, this is kind of a big addition, but we incorporated, I think, a very efficient and smart way of looking at how to renovate the entire building without having to destroy a lot. So this is a model that we built, and here's the addition, but what I'm talking about is this south addition here, which allows a connection into Thomas Beebe's piece here, and then the main axis comes this way, and a new stair here. This is a view of the Loomis building and the addition here and the addition over there. And this is the steps that lead down into the lower level. So we extended the stairs out to make an amphitheater. They have a very good children's education program called Art Sparks, which is really quite well known. And the Art Sparks is down in the lower basement, so we thought this space could be utilized. So on the street, we have the new addition, and we thought it was important to, when you're in the lobby of the new lobby, that you see the old Loomis building, that you're always constantly aware of the presence of the old building. So as you're walking up the grand stair to the contemporary galleries, the new contemporary galleries, that you have a view of the Loomis building. And the Art Sparks had to go through a very narrow staircase and almost dungeon-like feeling, so we opened up a space in the middle of our addition to allow for new entrance into Art Sparks and open that up for a good space. So the back part is important because we created a new space for the students to utilize, and we had the people factor and the nature factor come into effect in this area to open up the auditorium. This is a big door that opens up the cafe, and to create a sense of community within the Louisville campus and the University of Louisville campus, and to really be able to access that museum in a direct way. Okay. The other project I want to show is, again, close to home. It's in Venice, and it's the L&M Gallery, which opened 2 years ago. And again, the gallery there was an old building here, a 1920s power station out of brick. And it was a very tight space. It was hard to get the offices and everything in there. But we wanted to create a space where the sculpture garden and the main gallery and the original gallery could all work as one and create a space in between. So as you can see, oh, well, this is not the slide, the kind of tightness of that and kind of filling that in with office space. And this shape of this had to become a diamond. because of the lack of space. And here's the building. This is the old 1920s power station on Venice Boulevard. And we reflected the existing architecture by utilizing brick again, used brick rather than a different material to define and kind of have a dialogue between the new and the old and the space in between. And here's a view of the old building with the new building. And this is the old gallery. We exposed part of the existing structure and created a new skylight in there. And then the new gallery. And so we tried to reflect the character of the old building in the new building as well, and creating kind of these open spaces. And interestingly enough, the shape of the building is not square, and you kind of expect it to be square. So when you first walk in, you wonder, you know, am I imagining something that's not there? But it's an interesting effect that it created. And the sculpture garden out here, so they put the art on the outside as well as the inside, and so there's direct connections in and out. So the next project, I'm going kind of quickly because I'm going to run out of time. The next project is the Pomona College Studio Art Hall on the campus of Pomona College in Claremont. And it's in a part of campus which is far east of the campus edge. So as you may know, that Claremont has a very strong tradition, a master plan done by Myron Hunt, and a couple of buildings by Myron Hunt. So there's a very strong tradition of using Spanish colonial or some form of architecture that reflects that character and that tradition. And our building was kind of to the edge. So this is the kind of the new arts district. So we were able to have some latitude from the stylistic requirements for the rest of the campus. And it was really imagined, and we worked very closely with the faculty, the people of the school, and really was a collaborative process with the faculty in our office in trying to determine the kind of spaces that they wanted. So there was a space requirement for the actual studios, the studios, but they also wanted a lot of interstitial spaces between the volumes. And so the building became kind of pulled apart as a series of volumes under one all-encompassing roof and a courtyard. And I forgot to mention that a new parking garage was built here just last year, and students will funnel through the courtyard of the Sievers and connect through our building in this way. There's Stephen Ehrlich's new dormitories are up here, and most of the dormitories for the sophomores are up there. So they're going to call this Sophomore Walk, and they're going to redo this street into a pedestrian-only street. So that played a very important part, as well as this connection on 4th Street, which is now completely non-vehicular and pedestrian, and how to connect to the Wash. Completely forgot to talk about the Wash. The Wash is an area where they have these beautiful live oaks, and it's very natural here. And this really is at the edge of campus. So we wanted to allow students to come and walk through the building and into the Wash. And that was an important kind of circulation path that we wanted to adhere to and enhance. So this is the building. This is Sievers, and this is our building. It has this big roof that reflects some of the warehouse spaces that are prevalent in Los Angeles and other parts of the country. But we're taking a slight twist on that, and the volumes of the art studios and things are below. This is a view, kind of a very stretched out view from the other end of Sievers, and how you would connect through the Washes over here and the big roof over here. And the entrance, they have a grand stair that acts as a kind of a gathering spot as well, in the interior courtyard. We're studying kind of the way that the joists could work within that space. The diagonal structure is all steel. Actually, there's a two-way curve. There's a curve that goes in this direction, and it's completely flat in this direction, but it's cut at an angle, so it looks like it's a two-way curve. Some detailing. So we're studying how this might look with different configuration and patterns of the wood joist. It's actually a composite material called LVL, I can't remember. but it's a composite of plywood made into joists. So I'm going to talk quickly about the Grand Rapids Art Museum, which is the first museum that we completed in 2007. And it's the first LEED Gold museum in the country. And Grand Rapids is a small community, fairly conservative, but there's a very nice park here designed by Maya Lin, and our project fronted it. So I think what I want to do just briefly is just talk about the relationship of the park to the building and the relationship of the building to the streets, because I think that was a very strong driving factor for our design. Because this was a very important living room for the city, that they held skating in the wintertime and concerts at night, we wanted to create a big portico and allow the fabric of the park to enter into the museum. And at the same time, this street was very highly retail oriented, so we put all of the retail functioning in there, but at the same time creating a sense of transparency. You can almost see through the building because there's an inner courtyard behind this wall. So from the street, you can see through the store and see the courtyard and see beyond into the lobby. So it's a very strong connection to the street and a transparency that was very important for the project. And at the back, so this is what occurs on that space. And this is the kind of fingers that come out into the park and allowing the park to enter into the museum. The ground floor has a big lobby and the museum shop and things like that, the auditorium. The second floor and the third floor are the galleries. And we have the lantern galleries, which I'll get to. So you can see kind of the relationship of the park to the museum, a big canopy kind of reaching out and sheltering people from the snow or rain in the winter and sun in the summer. Under construction, it's a concrete and steel frame structure. Concrete was a primary structure. And these stairs and very tall spaces. So these are the lantern galleries, which at night glow, and during the day they bring light in, which I'll show you quickly. The entrance. And this is one of the fingers that reach into the museum. There's a water collection system of gray water collection, and three 18,000-gallon tanks underneath this pool. There's a pool of water here, and it falls down and it collects it, and it's used for gray water. And this is looking the other way, the pocket park. This is the retail I was referring to, the transparency of the retail along that street, and the auditorium, and the use of local materials, the wood, auditorium, the gallery. So this is a lantern gallery, which allows natural light to infuse the interior of the gallery space. And this is a series of 3 layers of scrim, of louvers, and argon gas glazing system to allow natural light to still come in, but not to the effect of ruining and damaging the artwork. This is the back east court. So this is a tall, 40-foot tall glass facade on the other street. So I think it's very effective. When you're in the museum, you can look out through the scrim, which you can see through because of the light is brighter outside, and you see the street. And in the nighttime, when you're on the street, you can see into the museum. So there's a very strong connection with the urban fabric in this building, not only for the park, but also from the retail side and from the back side. And I think that was very strong. I'm just going to go through this real quickly. The 3 systems, and this is the kind of aluminum louver system that was built, kind of likewise. So the lower level is completely open. So the louver is kind of from 10 feet above. This is the lobby. This is a sculpture yard. So from that street, you can look through the store, into the sculpture yard, into the lobby, and the lantern gallery. So the lantern gallery has several layers of light control, and it bounces light into the space. And we can control the light so that there's only 5-foot candles of light, so you can show works on paper without any problem here. So it turned to be a very effective way to allow natural light to bathe the center of the space, but completely control it. So I'm just going to go quickly through this. And the glazing, this was actually Mexican glass, 14 feet tall. That was the only place other than Germany, which was too expensive, so we got it in Mexico. And the framing of the lanterns, and the lantern with the light coming down the center. And I'm just going to end with, well, this is the last project. It's a house in Phuket for a client. And the house is a series, it's a concrete house, the main house and the guest house here, with a series of walls that become structural in different configurations and different angles all of them at the same length, except for a few, defining the spaces. So it's kind of an interesting way to demarcate space, and all of these are in concrete. So this is all poured in place concrete. It's a series of three frames nested into each other, and between the frames are the staircase that take you up and down. So this is a plan of all the walls. This is a screening room and the 2 bedrooms and kitchen. It's an unusual house because there's a kitchen down here, and there's also a kitchen on the upper level, which has the most view. So the family will live most of the time on the upper level, and this will be for a kitchen for the outdoor living, kind of like. So these are kind of conceptual. Of course, there's going to be mullions and things, but the walls act for displaying of art. He's a big art collector, and allow for the refraction of light off of the surfaces into the inner spaces. So I think that's going to be a very important part of the house and how natural light enters. This is the master suite level, the master suite, a study area, and the bathroom. And all these are defined by these walls, a view of that area, a view of the study, and looking out over the pool. And this is in an area called Ban Yamu in Thailand. And the upper level has the living area here, and the dining and the kitchen. So this is where they'll spend most of the time. It has the best views, looking out over the water. And so these are the kind of walls and how we connect the walls with glass, sometimes opaque, sometimes transparent. And we loosely define spaces by the walls, and the walls and sometimes become structural and sometimes non-structural. But it really is the refraction of light and the control of light from this, because the client does not want to have any windows per se controlling the way light enters. Just another view and some sections, so you see they're kind of shifting back and forth these frames, and so you can see the frames, the first one, the second one, and the third frame. And so I just want to end with a little bit of how laboratories. I think I talked a little bit about the relationship of why architecture and how laboratories, and just to show you an example of that, the L&M Gallery, some art that inspired us, asked us to design a table and some chairs, and so how laboratory was instrumental in that. Kulapat and Bob Dornberger in our office, who runs how laboratory, devised a folding system to create these folding tables out of steel plates and powder coated white. So these are 2 tables, 2 side tables, and this is the work table that the director uses. And then another client wanted a rock chair made of rock. He's an art collector and on the board of directors at the Speed Art Museum, and he collects interesting things. So he thought that a rock chair would be interesting. So we thought of different ways, and how would you make a rock chair, first of all. But we thought of different ways that we could do that with wire or cords, and this was kind of some experimentation of how to connect the rocks with stainless steel rods, and how the rods create a network of structure that can hold the rocks in a position that is okay to sit on without really hurting your butt. So this was Robert in our office working with Hal and kind of developing that and coming up with a solution. So that is the rock chair, and that is another rock chair. This is a reclining rock chair. And this is being tested, and here you go. So that's Bob, and Bob is the director of HOW, and Robert is another person in our office, and it can be used for putting things on. Anyway, so I think that HOW is becoming more and more an integral part of the interface with why, and we really wish to interlace the activities of why with the activities of how, and how those two can work together is really the goal of the relationship of those two parts. So, as I said, our office is not myself or not Kulapat or not any individual. It's really a collection of people working together, and I think that the workshop component of our office is a very important component in how we work and how we relate to one another and how we produce the ideas and continually thinking about how we can make it an interesting environment to be creative and to design. So these are the kind of people in our office, and that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's one.
Yeah, Mark.
Oh.
You say that light is a big part of composition. Do you study most in models, or do you now do mostly computer representations?
It's both. It's both. I mean, I think primarily we start in models. We make a lot of models. I don't know if maybe if I showed you the picture of our office, there was a lot of models. So we make a lot of models first. And then we work back and forth between models and the computer graphics. And then these days you can really study the sun angle and sun infiltration. But there's a technical side of sun and light. But there's also the, I want to use the word phenomenological side of what that means and how it expresses the space and materiality that we're particularly interested in as well. And that part of it, the detailing, is really important, how things come together and meet, because that is what is really revealed by, natural light as well as artificial light. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned in Praise and Shadow, was that how you ended up becoming interested in architecture?
No, I was, as I mentioned, I studied I have a degree in biochemistry, and it was really I can't say it was solely the trip to Europe, but I had thought about architecture, while I was going to school. But I liked what I was studying. It was very fascinating. I was interested in muscular contraction, the biochemistry of that. So I was interested in that, so I did that. And then when I went to Europe, I was just amazed by what I saw there. And primarily the urban condition in Europe is so different than, the United States, especially Seattle. So I found that to be very compelling. And those things kind of came together. And unfortunately, I didn't talk to anybody about what it takes to apply to architecture school. So I should have had some advice and maybe got into I shouldn't say that. I won't say that. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
Thanks so much. A question, just the comment is how great it is you're going to teach kids.
Oh, thank you.